Well, I read a headline this week that I thought was really weird and really funny to me. It just seemed odd, bizarre. Here it comes. Ready? Okay. It said, Tennessee man secretly lived in family's attic. Secretly lived there. I've traveled to some pretty seedy places that have had like mice or rats in the attic. It was not hard to figure that out. Like right away, I could figure that out. I mean, I was trying to lay in bed there for 2 minutes, trying to go to sleep, and I hear the vermin scurrying around in the attic. I just think if a full-grown man was living in my attic, I mean, he wouldn't be living in my attic. I would find out. I mean, he might drop into my attic, break into my attic, not live in my attic. I mean, what was wrong with those people? You got a man living in your attic and you didn't know it. There are some things that if they're there, you know it, and if it's not there, you certainly know it. I think of the topic that I've been studying this week as one of those in the Christian life. If it's there, you know it. You may not be able to point to it and go, it's right there, but you know it's there. I mean, you may not be able to define it very well. It may be hard to kind of describe it, but you know the effects of it, and it's there, and it's obvious, and it's evident. And when it's absent, it's absent. And the bigger this thing is in the Christian life, the more obvious it is. And as it grows, it's just unavoidable. It's there, and you know it's there. What I'm talking about is what Paul ended his letter to the Ephesians with. The last 8 words in our English text speaks of love our Lord Jesus Christ with a love indestructible, insoluble, just a continuing, enduring, indestructible kind of love. A love that is so obvious that it's there and you see it and you feel the effects of it. You may not be able to say, well, this is what I mean by that. But you know it affects everything about a person's life. I mean, it couldn't be more basic than that the people of God should be known for loving God. The people of God should love God. I mean, it's just obvious and yet so important that we make sure that we have a kind of love that is undiminished, that is not perishing, it's incorruptible, it's an imperishable kind of love that everyone knows you have it. You meet some people, they're godly people, you see the effects of the love of God in their life. And you got other people that claim to be Christians and they may go to church, but I mean, you just don't see the effects of it. I want to help you with that one primary, fundamental, essential, critical aspect of the Christian life, loving God. In the psalm that I've chosen to study this morning, Psalm 116, it is nothing other than a great primer, a template, an outline of what it is to love God, what it means to love God, and the reasons to love God. It starts with the why of loving God, and then it goes on to the how of loving God. Why do we love God as God's people, and how do we love God as God's people? It's very simple. Matter of fact, look at the psalm with me, Psalm 116. I printed it there for you on the worksheet. I can see it right at the beginning of this verse 1, right? Here's the beginning section. The first 11 verses start with this, I love the Lord. And of course, it's capital O-R-D. If you're new with us in this study, you understand that's the English convention to show us in the translation that we're talking about the Hebrew word for God's proper name, Yahweh. So I love Yahweh because, so I'm set up well here. I understand that he's going to display to us in his life, his godly life, here are the things that have made me love God. I love God because of this. And he goes on for 11 verses about all those things. And then in verse 12, drop down to verse 12, he says, what shall I render to Yahweh for all of his benefits to me? I'm kind of tipping my hand there to say there are many things about what God does to benefit us that should certainly fuel our love for him. But then he says, what do I do in response to all that? What am I going to do? And then he goes on for the next 8 verses and tells us what he's going to do. Here's how I love God. These Psalms are here as an example for us, and we ought to follow these examples, particularly this one because it ends with a command for us to follow in the pattern. And so I want us to follow the pattern and fuel something that should be so fundamental to you. If you make a claim to be a person of God, in our case, we call ourselves Christians. We are God's children. Then we ought to be characterized by the love of God. Why should we love him? How should we love him? Let's look at this, starting with the first 4 verses. The psalmist says, I love the Lord because, here it comes, he's heard my voice and my pleas for mercy. Okay, I love him because I prayed and he answered, because he inclined his ear to me. Therefore, I'm going to keep on praying. I'm going to keep on calling him. Therefore, I will call on him as long as I live. How bad was this? Apparently some big thing, something that threatened his life. Whatever it was that God did to incline his ear and answer him was something big. Verse 3, the snares of death encompassed me. The pangs of Sheol, the poetic word for the grave, they lay hold on me. I suffered distress and anguish. So this is a big thing. And then he says, I prayed. I called on the name of Yahweh. And here was his prayer, quote, "Oh Yahweh, I pray, deliver my soul." And of course he did. Verse 1, he heard. Verse 2, he inclined his ear. God answered his prayer. Look at your worksheet. We need to love the Lord because, let's make this our psalm this morning, because he's answered your prayers, and I'm sure he has.